And Zoning Commission meeting of Tuesday, September 25th, 2018. It is now 7 p.m. And if everyone would please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please, Rudy.
Commissioner Schroeder.
Here.
Vice Chair Heck.
Present.
Commissioner McGraw. Commissioner Kreidler.
Present.
Commissioner Frank.
Present.
Chairwoman Nesser.
Present.
Commissioner Howard.
Here.
6 present. We have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda, which is consideration of approval of tonight's agenda. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission accept the agenda as presented.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Chair Heck.
Yes.
Commissioner Kreidler.
Yes.
Commissioner Frank.
Yes.
Chairwoman Nesser.
Yes.
Commissioner Howard.
Yes.
Commissioner Schroeder.
Yes.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll move on to the first presentation item, public hearing, which is a presentation, discussion, public hearing, and consideration of case CUP-1-18. And, hi. Is that on? No, it's not on.
Oh, okay. Start over. Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm the planning intern, Danielle Jordan with the City of Apache Junction. This is a revocation of P&Z resolution number CUP-1-18. The CUP allowed the placement of 4 temporary cargo containers for personal use at 2090 West Superstition Boulevard. And this is a super short slideshow. So this was approved back in April. And basically, per the section of the code, an approved CUP may be revoked by the commission following public hearing and a finding that there had been material noncompliance with any condition prescribed in the permit or the use generates a demonstrated public safety, health, or welfare concern. So that's this part of the code that allows us to bring CUPs back for revocation. Basically, this CUP was the one that allowed all those, the 4 cargo containers. They had to come back with a business plan. They also had to do paint the cargo containers, put in some landscaping, wooden vinyl slats, things like that. They have failed to meet conditions number 1 and number 2. Those 2 conditions had a 90-day timeline. So number 1 was painting the cargo containers a neutral desert tone color. And number 2 was completing and adding either wood or vinyl slats to the west and south chain link fence. So the property owner has not done that yet since the CUP has been approved, and it has passed that 90 days. And also has come to staff attentions through communications with the representative from the case and the property owners that they are planning on selling the property and it no longer warrants that CUP. So the main reason for approving that CUP was to bring a future business onto that property, and they needed to come back within 6 months with a business plan. Obviously, that deadline is actually coming up, but now they're planning on selling the property. And as of today, 3 of the cargo containers have been removed, and the last one will be removed by the end of the month, according to the property owner. So that has not been verified by a site visit yet.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Michelle? Or not Michelle. I'm looking at the...
You're looking at the...
Looking at the wrong thing. Anybody? Nothing? Okay, thank you. Is the representative here?
No,
They're not?
No.
Okay. So they don't have any statements or comments or questions? So, is this up for public discussion? Yeah. Does anyone in the public wish to make any comments on this item? No one? Hearing none, we'll close the public portion of the meeting and open this for any discussions. Anyone? Hearing none, we'll call for a motion.
Okay, Madam Chair,
Yes.
before I make a motion, Joel, if I can ask a question relative to the process for this. Is it possible for us to be able to, when I make a motion, make the motion with the findings, and then get a second, and then have a discussion if there needs?
Absolutely.
We can do that.
You could do it a variety of ways, but Robert's Rules allows that. But there are other ways to do it, but that is one way to do it.
Okay, so.
And that is a common way to do it, where you make a motion, and there's discussion, and then there's a second, and then you can call for a vote. That is another way to do it. There's not just one way to do it, but some people think there's just one way to do it, but there isn't.
Okay. Okay, good. I just thought it would help me to
Sure,
be able to keep that organized. Okay.
absolutely.
All right. Very good. Then, Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission revoke Planning and Zoning Commission Resolution CUP-1-18 that allowed the placement of 4 temporary cargo containers for personal use with conditions at 2090 West Superstition Boulevard, zoned General Commercial B1, based on the following findings. The applicant failed to abide by and follow the conditions number 1 and 2, which called for the painting of the cargo containers and completing the wood or vinyl slats to the chain link fencing in the approved timeframe. And then the owner also has made it known that the owners are in the process of selling the property and no longer have the need for the cargo containers.
That's the motion?
That's the
Okay. Is this where you said we make a second and then we discuss it?
We need a second.
Yeah,
for
there
that.
could be
We need a
second.
second before discussion.
Second.
Yep.
You
Okay.
can do it that way or either way, but if you want to do it that way, yes, and then you could
Okay.
call for a vote after that.
Okay, we have a motion. Who made the second? We have a second. And I'm gotten confused. Are we discuss it? Any
Now you,
discuss?
yeah, you call for a discussion.
Okay, we'll call for a discussion. Does anyone have anything to say or comments or
Madam Chair?
anything about this? Yes.
The way I understand it, how I read it, the owner has already defaulted on a couple payments and plans to sell the property, and just kind of a done deal, right? Does everybody else kind of get that from what?
Yeah, yes.
Madam Chair, if I remember correctly, too, he started this by moving in illegally to start out with. So from the very beginning, it was improper.
Yes. Willie, anything?
I
You,
concur.
Stephen, nothing? Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll have a roll call vote then.
Commissioner Kreidler,
Yes.
Commissioner Frank,
Yes?
Chairwoman Nisser,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Schroeder,
Yes.
Vice Chair Heck.
Yes.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll move on to the second item, which is presentation, discussion, public hearing, and consideration of case CUP-4-18, a conditional use permit renewal request by Nature's Wonder.
Good evening, Commission. For the record, my name is Sidney Rice, planner here on staff. Tonight I'll be giving a short presentation on CUP 418, conditional use permit for Nature's Wonder Dispensary. The project is located adjacent to North Apache Trail. It's outlined there in red. The current zoning for that complex, it used to be the old Bashes Center, is zone B3. The applicant was here before you originally in 2015, where they gained approval from you guys. But in their conditions of approval noted an expiration of 3 years, and that's the reason that they're here today. They are requesting approval for their a renewal for their conditional use permit, but without a time frame. Here we have the zoning map. As you can see, that the majority of the uses that are surrounding the site are commercial. To the west, we have some residential. The applicant did, throughout this process, provide us with CUP and medical marijuana findings. Those findings are noted in the staff report. Staff has not received any complaints from this use since the approval of 2015. This case was advertised both on the site through a posting, newspaper, and mailings, and staff is recommending approval of CUP 418, subject to the findings and the conditions found in your staff report. With that said, that concludes my presentation. I'm here if you have any questions, and so is the applicant.
Madam Chair.
Question? Yes.
One of the questions I have, I know the prior CUP was approved before the current city code that's in place, but the minimum 750 feet between dispensary and public park, there's only about 63 feet between. Is there, or would it be prudent to have some type of letter on file as far as a non-compliance?
Sure. Commissioner Kreidler, to my knowledge, since 2015, we haven't received any complaints from users at the park nor other residents. I know that the city did erect a wall. In terms of your question specifically, I'd probably like to defer that to the plan administrator. Perhaps Rudy could help me answer that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kreidler, when Nature's Wonder processed their CUP for this site back in 2015, it was actually under the previous version of our medical marijuana regulations. I believe it was in 2017 that some of the regulations were changed, and you may recall the SVACHA people processed a text amendment before they processed their conditional use permit request for their dispensary. So one of the things that was incorporated into the new language had to do with this issue of pre-existing uses. And Sydney, did you include the code in here?
I did read it in the packet.
Okay.
I was just wondering if it would be prudent to have a letter of non-compliance on file, because I didn't see that inside in the packet anywhere.
Now, non-compliance is a very specific term. What is your definition of non-compliance?
It's not complying with the code as written.
Okay.
And we're a member of the public to go through and read that without seeing any type of letter of non-compliance. One might assume that they're actually violating city code without knowing the time frame or reference the time frame. That's why I'm just wondering, would it be prudent to have a letter of non-compliance?
I think what you mean is a letter of non-conformity?
Maybe that's a better
Okay.
term.
Well, here we go. Here's the provision I was looking for. The code includes this language: an existing medical marijuana facility that has received a conditional use permit approval from the city prior to the effective date of this ordinance shall be allowed to continue operating at the approved location regardless of any newly defined spacing requirements, as long as said operation remains in strict accordance with the conditions of approval of said facility, or as may otherwise be approved by a CUP amendment or renewal. So I think that covers Nature's Wonder. If it was any other situation that wasn't codified, then yes, we would probably ask for a non-conforming letter before initiating some kind of public process. But I believe it is covered in the ordinance.
Okay, I just wanted that clarified, and that was really the only question I had.
Okay. Robert, anything? Peter? Michael?
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Rudy, did the police department have any input? Have you guys checked with the police department to see if there's been any problems?
There has not been any issues with Chief Kelly has informed us about.
Willie? Nothing? Okay, I have nothing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is the applicant here?
Yes, yes.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members. Leslie Sorensen representing Nature's Wonder, Paul and Kim Shields. They regret that they weren't able to be here today, but their daughter went into labor this morning, and I'm hopeful by now that they've welcomed a grandson, which is their first grandchild here. So any other reason they, of course, would be here except for that. Want to thank you for hearing this item today. It's obviously very important to Nature's Wonder and Paul and Kim to have their CUP renewed. I also want to thank your staff. Sydney did an excellent job. It was great working with him, and of course, Rudy has always been there as well. I do have a slide deck here today. If you want me to skip it, I'm happy to do that to keep your meeting going. I can present it, I can stand for questions. However you would prefer to proceed, I'm able to do.
I don't
Do you need it?
know that we.
Do you want it?
Might-
don't-
Madam
I think
Chair,
it's explained,
I-
yes.
I just have one question. Is there any changes from the previous CUP?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Cridler, I don't believe so. The conditions that Sydney has laid out in your packet, it's the last, I think, page and a half of the staff report. There are things that were removed because they're no longer applicable, like needing to get building permits and needing to provide the city with copies of a final business license to operate and those kinds of things. Those we provided as part of the CUP application. So my belief is that there's no changes. We're not going to be offering a delivery service, no pickup windows, no on-site. The signage is going to remain the same. The hours of operation are remaining the same. So we don't anticipate any changes.
This
Great.
is just a CUP to continue operating because we put the condition 3 years ago that we would review this in 3 years.
Yes, Madam Chair, that's why we're here. We think
Yeah.
they love operating here in AJ, and so they're
Yeah.
happy to continue to be a partner with the city.
Madam
Anyone
Chair.
else? Yes.
Did I hear right? Is this particular CUP an indefinite CUP?
No, that's up to us to decide. We made 3 years ago, when we approved the CUP, we put a 3-year limit on it to bring this back to see how everything was operating. Tonight, that's up to whoever makes a motion, if they want to put another 3 years or 1
During
year.
the presentation, I thought he
Yeah.
mentioned that it was for,
Oh, was it? I thought it was, it would ha-
Madam Chair, Commissioner Schroeder, that is correct. They are requesting an approval without a time limit.
And Madam Chair, if I might address that particular issue. These conditions of the CUP, if there were going to be any major operational changes, would require us to come back and ask for a new application. So from a permanency status, we have to go through this process every so often. I don't think a lot of other businesses have to do that. And so there are a lot of conditions in here that would require us to come back if there were going to be any major changes.
Does that answer anything?
Yeah,
You got-
some-
Okay.
I think
Anyone?
7, I think condition 7
Yeah.
covers that, I think, so, yep, okay.
Anyone else? That it? Okay.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your support.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Does anyone in the public wish to speak on this item? Anyone? No one? Okay. I'll close the public hearing and open it up for discussion if there is any.
Madam Chair.
Yes?
Go ahead, Peter.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I believe Nature's Wonder has been a very solid partner with the city. I know they've been very involved. They have sponsored events in the city, and have, I think, been a very good business partner with the city. To my knowledge, I have never heard, and obviously Rudy was able to confirm that there has never been an issue relative to the police needing to be involved. So I think they've worked very diligently to be a good partner, so.
Yeah, I agree. They've done everything we've asked them to do. They've, are very good business in the town, so I don't have any problems.
Yeah, I completely share Peter's sentiment. I probably should have went first. But I would like
You
to
would've
add.
said it better.
I would like to add that I've had a tour of the facility. It's very regulated, very clean, very professionally ran business. And I think they're a really good addition to the city with all the things they do outside of just operating the business.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I agree. I think they have been a great member of the community. I don't see a problem with going indefinite with their request.
Anything? Nothing? Okay. Then I'll call for a motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve case CUP-4-18, the conditional use permit request by Nature's Wonder Dispensary, located at 260 West Apache Trail, represented by Leslie Sorensen of Ryan, Rapp, and Underwood, PLC, subject to the following findings and conditions. So, in terms of the findings, finding A, adequacy of roadways, off-street parking, public facilities, and services to accommodate the proposed use. I believe, according to the information from the applicant, and I believe from the commission, we would agree there is adequate, the roadways around their business is adequate. They have plenty of off-street parking and services to accommodate their use. Finding B, negative impacts arising from the emission of odor, dust, gas, noise, lighting, vibration, smoke, heat, or glare. The commission is unaware of any complaints relative to those conditions. It is understood that, according to the applicant, that they have made efforts to mitigate any of the noise or dust, and they operate within the appropriate hours so that lighting and such would not contribute to the negative impact in the area. Condition C, contribution to the deterioration of the neighborhood or the negative impact on neighborhood property values. Again, the applicant has stated, and the commission agrees, that they have operated a very sound business. They have actually spent a good bit of funds in order to upgrade the property and to assure that it was well maintained. In addition, they also worked with the city to develop the wall that separated that shopping area from the Flatiron Park. Finding D, compatibility with surrounding uses and structures. The Nature's Wonder is in a small shopping center. They're set off from the strip part of the mall. However, it is very compatible with the surrounding uses, and the structure does comply and has been there for many years. Finding E, conformance with the general plan and city policies. The commission does find that they are in conformance with the general plan and policies. Condition F, screening and buffering of uses. The commission does agree with the applicant that at the time the city constructed Flatiron Park, that Nature's Wonder worked with the city on developing that wall to assure that there was a buffer between those two. And again, to the commission's knowledge, or at least mine, I'm not aware of any issues with that. Finding G, unique nature of the property, use and/or development's physical characteristics. The commission does recognize that there's a unique nature, there's a unique use for this property. However, it has certainly proven in the last 3 years that it has been very reliable. It has operated with, I believe, integrity, and has been a solid business partner in the city. So there are the findings. And the conditions, we have conditions 1 through 7. I concur, I include those as part of the motion to approve, recognizing that condition number 7, the Planning and Zoning Commission shall reserve the right to reconsider or overturn Nature's Wonder's conditional use permit approval at a new public hearing for noncompliance with any condition prescribed as part of said CUP-4-18 permit approval. In other words, that gives them the opportunity to continue into perpetuity unless something else is problematic. And that's my motion.
Your motion? We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please, Rudy?
Commissioner Frank,
Yes.
Chairwoman Nesser.
Yes.
Commissioner Howard.
Yes.
Commissioner Schroeder.
Yes.
Vice Chair Heck.
Yes.
Commissioner Kreidler.
Yes.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Now, were we supposed to have a discussion ahead of?
You didn't call for one.
Okay, yeah,
But you did have a second.
Yeah.
So if you don't call for a discussion, then,
if somebody disagreed, they'd have to
They-
indicate they didn't
right.
vote in favor, okay.
Okay, we'll move on to the third presentation, which is presentation, discussion, public hearing, and consideration of case CUP-6-18, a request by Mountain View Lutheran Church, represented by Frank Quinn. And you're not Frank Quinn.
No. Good evening again, Madam Chair and Commissioners. This is a conditional use permit request, case CUP-6-18 by Mountain View Lutheran Church, AJ Inc., and is represented tonight by Frank Quinn of Brilliant LED Signs, LLC. So first, we'll take a look at the aerial map. It's located at 2122 South Goldfield Road. The current zoning is public institutional by planned development, and they are requesting to allow for a 13-foot, 4-inch tall V-shaped EMD monument sign set at the west southerly property line. So here's the zoning map, and to the north, we have single-family resident. To the east, we have vacant estate land. To the south is a vacant commercial land that's going through the GPA process. And then to the west are more single-family residences. So a little background on the property. So this was originally 3 separate parcels, but was combined into one throughout the years. It has gone through multiple rezoning cases to basically rezone it into a multiple family zone. And then obviously with the zoning code update in 2014, it became public institutional by planned development. So here are the sign code deviations off of the table 11-1 from the sign code. Basically, request number 1 was a V-shaped sign. So our sign code doesn't define a V-shaped sign, so therefore they're deviating from that. Request number 2 is exceeding the height limit. So the code only allows up to 12 feet in height for monument or freestanding signs. They're requesting an additional 16 inches for an embellishment area. Then request number 3 is a 0-foot setback. The code requires a 5-foot setback from the property line for all monument signs. So those are the 3 deviations that they are requesting from the sign code. We're gonna skip that one. So here is kind of where the it's gonna be located on the site. Oops. So north is that way, and then right there is gonna be Old West Highway, and Hilton is that way, right there. Yep. So you can kind of see the triangle shape that they're creating. So here's another site plan of how it's going to look. So you can see that V-shaped. So it's going to be, so instead of back to back, it's going to be a V. And then here is what the elevations are going to look like. So our sign code does only allow 50% of the sign to be the electronic messaging board, and right now they are meeting that criteria. So you can see that the bottom half is going to be that electronic, and the top half is going to be the static. And then if you see right here is going to be that 12-foot, and then this area right here is that extra 16 inches that they're requesting for that embellishment area. Just to give you perspective. Public input wise, the sign was posted, notices were sent out, and it was advertised in the newspaper. Staff has not received any responses. So staff analysis or recommendation. So the staff is recommending partial approval for this request. They're recommending in favor of a 12-foot tall V-shaped monument sign set at the property line. And the reason for that is just the fairness and consistency of staying with the code. And going through the findings for the criteria for a CUP, the major findings for staff for criteria D, E, and G. So D, staff believes that due to the fact that the buildings are set back from Old West Highway and that Old West Highway is an unusually wide main roadway, that a 0-foot setback and a V-shaped sign is appropriate. And criteria E, even with the proposed sign deviating from the code, it's not straying too far from the code and the requests are reasonable. And then criteria G, due to the, again, the unique characteristics of the property and the surrounding area, and there is a grade change off of Old West Highway. And Old West Highway is this unusual right-of-way. Staff believes that having the 0-foot setback and the V-shaped is a reasonable request, but we believe staying at the 12-foot height is adequate. So the recommended conditions, so approval is given for one 12-foot tall monument sign set at the property line at natural grade in accordance with the drawings submitted with the case. Then condition number 2, that the proposed sign be properly permitted and constructed, allowed in number 1, with all of the heights, location, elevations, everything like that. Number 3, that the applicant must submit a landscape plan to supplement the base of the sign at the same time the sign permit is submitted. And then number 4, that Planning and Zoning Commission shall reserve the right to reconsider or overturn. And that's it.
Okay. I don't have any question for you. I do for the applicant, but
Okay.
anyone else? Any
Well,
questions?
Madam Chair, I do have one. I think Danielle can answer it. So, looking at that one, the east elevation with that one. Okay, so just from the dimensions, so it appears to me on the left side, the whole sign is slated to be 14 feet 4 inches tall.
So it's 144 inches.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So, yeah, so they kind of,
That's all right. Now I get it.
yeah.
I'm-
So they
I'm
kind of
looking at
separated
that
out of what
wrong.
was, so the max is
Okay.
12, and then they're showing that 16 foot of what they
I got
would
it.
call, 16 inches,
Okay.
sorry,
Got it.
of what they
Okay.
call the embellishment area, which is basically this triangle, I think they call it, yeah, this cross area.
Boy, my eyesight's going, so.
No,
Also, can you help me understand this V-shaped thing? Is it just like
Yeah,
you'd be looking
so,
at it, that,
yeah, it just has a triangle, it's like a V. So instead of
Okay.
being a normal monument sign of flat, when you,
I guess that'll be a question I'll ask. I
There,
don't,
that one right
Yeah.
yeah, you can, I know that the representative has
Yeah.
more of the reasoning behind going with a V-shaped sign as opposed to a normal, just monument freestanding sign, and you can ask him more of
Okay.
requesting that specifically in this.
So we're looking down on this. huh?
You're looking down at that, so, yes, you're looking,
Okay.
yeah. So
Oh,
the
oh.
two signs will be
We're on
right.
top looking down.
Yeah, so the
I'm
two signs would
thinking
be
I'm looking at the
here
It's gonna
cross-section
sit like
at the
this.
side.
and here.
So you're saying it's like two
Yeah.
signs?
It's like two signs like this.
Oh,
I didn't get that
I
either.
thought it was a
Don't
cross-section.
laugh at
I
me.
thought it-
I'm
Yeah.
with you, Ted.
Okay.
Madam
Actually-
Chair, if
Still
I
going
could,
for my engineering degree.
the reason for this request is our sign code only allows two types of signs. One is a monument sign and one's called post and panel, which post and panel allowed in the current code could just be some 6x6s or 4x4s with a sign on top. So I think we are gonna get back to the sign code.
Yeah.
And I don't know if maybe that's one we don't want. This might be more appropriate. Again, I think the applicant will explain that in some cities, depending on how wide that V is at the back, some cities allow 2 feet by code. It could go wider through some administrative process like we're doing here. So in their case, they've explained that based on the setback from the road, the visibility they're trying to get for people going eastbound on Old West Highway, they will be looking, if you look at this, this is a plan view, they'll be, so people going eastbound, if you will be seeing the right side of this. People heading into town will be seeing the left side.
We probably need to change our city code because I like the idea that people are using a little imagination and coming up with something different.
Yeah, no, I think, that's why I think we're looking at this as a reasonable request.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stephen, anybody else?
Nothing.
Okay. Yes, do you have anything else to?
No, that's,
Okay,
yeah, then the applicant and property owner
Yeah.
are here, so.
okay. Come on down.
Good evening, Commissioners. Madam. So to piggyback off the last discussion about the V, we kind of all know from our desktops, when you have a monitor there, if you slide to the right or slide to the left, it's kind of nice when you just move the monitor towards you. Or if you're in your family room and you're sitting far to the right or far to the left, it's nice to have that TV that pulls out and slides a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left because it's easier to view. So what we have learned over time, and we're in many different cities, the city of Mesa does allow a 2-foot to 0 V. The city, Maricopa County at large, the entire county, any distance on the V is up to the applicant, so they do allow it as well. And the idea is, as you're driving down the road, if the sign is far back from the road and is exactly perpendicular as you're driving, it's not as easy to see that big screen. So by tilting it, it actually makes it easier. So you're not wrestling with the sign, you're not fighting to see it. It's actually more pleasant by just tilting it towards the driving by. So we did a study, we did a line of sight study along Old West in our office. And so what we do is we end up putting, cars on the road and look at what they would be looking at. And yeah, maybe we can just put it here. So from here, there's a very faint line that says line of sight, and you can see the study from here, and we also have them from further back. So with this, we take a look at the angle, and if we were doing a television installation in your homes, or doing a painting in a gallery, the optimum position for a light would be the painting on the wall and 30 degrees off the center of that. We would take it up and we would advise to put the light in that spot so that when you look at the artwork, you would enjoy it the most from having the light at that angle. And same goes here. So with that line of sight study, it really shows from both east direction and west direction the most pleasant way to fall upon this sign is for it to have a V pattern. So okay, so having said that, is there any questions about the view? That one drawing that Danielle had up earlier, it is a plan view. So we're looking at top, and it does show how we would end up spreading the screens apart. So does anybody have any questions about the V issue? Then I'm going to move on to some other things.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I do have.
Okay.
So, Mr. Quinn, is this sign, is it adjustable? Can you move it around, or is when it's set, you're setting it to those lines of sight?
No, it is set. I like your idea about making it adjustable, making it adjustable. But this one is it is set at the optimum angle.
Okay. Because it looks like for the eastbound folks, its line of sight goes way back. I mean, you got to catch it pretty far back, right?
Well, yeah, all of it, the rate of speed and how fast you're traveling, even for the eastbound folks, it's actually a different angle on that side, and it's just from across the intersection there, as you can look, you're right on it. So as soon as you get onto the crossing of Hilton Road, right at Hilton Road, you're going to be able to see it where it's not far, straight and far back. So this property, and I'm glad the city concurs, that because of the distance back from the road, This makes it much more enjoyable to see. Okay, so the other part I wanted to bring up is the height. And Daniela had a nice screen. I don't know if I can hold it.
I can get that.
Okay, yeah.
Does this go off then, Rudy, or what? Yeah. I did that. Oh, I didn't want to, but.
He's gonna,
Try to click on this one? Oh.
Well, I'll get
no,
it.
he'll get
If
it.
I can get the right.
Just the elevator, that's it right there, yeah, thank you. Thanks, Larry. Yeah. So, here, the one place for a slight discrepancy or a disagreement is on the height. And I do understand the fairness and consistency, and I think we can still keep that in that, in special conditions, which is the reason why we're all here, is in cases that come forward that do have special conditions. And I think this property is very unique because Old West Highway does have a very wide property. In most other places, in a lot of cities, including this one, 5 feet, 10 feet, even 20 feet. Maricopa County at 20 feet. City of Mesa at 10 feet, and 15 feet, 12 feet. Here, we're 80 feet away. And as I stand in front of you, I'm 6'4". But if I'm 80 foot back, I think you think I'm 4'4". Because, the distance has a lot to do with it. So when you go that far back from the road, we're 80 feet back to the property line on this particular property. So it's that special condition that asks us for this embellishment area. And the embellishment area in many codes, the City of Mesa is 20% of the height. So 12 feet, 20% of 12 feet is 0.2 times 144, so we got 28 inches. We would be allowed an embellishment area of 2'4". And the embellishment area would be that little triangle, that triangle there above there, and that is for the identity part of the sign. And that's what we're asking is a small embellishment area of 16 inches on the top. And if you try to rework the design, and we've worked a lot because it was even higher than this, and when you move everything down 16 inches, the bottom of the sign, you end up seeing here, you can see that if we brought it down 16 inches, we would only be 16 inches above the ground. We would be, if you brought everything down equally from the point so you can still maintain the same shape and still maintain the cross, and you brought everything down 16 inches, the bottom of the sign is now very close to the ground. So anyway, we are asking for that embellishment area to allow the cross to be displayed. The cross is very big in the church's identity, and we're asking for that tonight.
Are you,
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anyone, any questions? I have a question for Rudy, but I don't have for you.
Okay, I also have another member of the church here that
Okay.
I'd like to have them speak as well.
Oh,
Thank you.
Mr. Shanebeck,
we're not letting
join
Frank-
us.
Frank can't speak. No.
Cat'll let anybody in here.
You should have security at this place. Good evening. My name is Frank Schambeck, 525 East Fred Avenue, Apache Junction. Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm here to speak on behalf of Mountain View Lutheran Church at 2122 South Goldfield Road, Apache Junction. I'm asking for your approval on the variance on the height of our new sign. Part of the sign, it's a very minor part of the sign, is what's going to exceed the 12 feet, so it's not all of it, just a portion of it. And we all know there's a history of sign variance. Recall Fry's got a sign variance, much because corporate design was pretty inflexible. An RV park on Old West Highway out towards our church got a variance in their sign due to the fact they're set back pretty far from the highway, and that it required that much height to put their logo on. And that was approved by the park, planning and zoning. Good reasons for providing flexibility in both of those sign codes. I was here for those and witnessed it. Both of those places provide tax revenue and other benefits for the city. Well, we at Mountain View also provides benefits for the city of Apache Junction. We have been reaching out for the community to make our facility available for use at no cost, in most cases, for the nonprofit organizations. I began there as events coordinator about a year ago, specifically to draw people into the church and show our facility off. And since then, we have hosted Apache Junction's town hall meeting, CAFA's Holiday House, which takes our gym up for 3 days, and we're going to do that again this year. We hosted Children's First Save Our Schools for a while till they disbanded. We hosted Days for Girls International. It's a fundraiser for South African charity that provides feminine hygiene kits. It's an interesting outfit. They hire seamstresses over there to sew the kits together, providing living wages as well as something that's drastically needed. We also hosted a focal point meeting, but I heard three people ran out of gas getting that far out into the reaches of AJ. Girl Scouts meet 4 times a month. We host PAL every Thursday. They're the parents of addicted loved ones. We hosted 2 Republican candidate forums, 2 down, 1 to go yet. Every month we host the Northern Pinell County Democrats. We're an equal opportunity facility. And we also have hosted the polling place here in August, and we will again in November. We do get some minimal fees for a couple of other things we do. There's a basketball ministry on alternate Monday nights, and in fall, church school uses our gym as their home court, and we get money for utilities from them. Also, every Monday between November and March, if you're looking for a place to polka, it's our facility. There's 150 to 200 people every afternoon having a good time on Mondays. And we have pickleball now 3 days a week if you're looking for a little of that. In addition to those things, we also provide staff at Genesis on Tuesdays. We also provide public school support. We just recently donated a bunch of AV equipment. And we also have targeted collection events. For instance, we filled backpacks this fall. And we are looking for more, so let us know if you've got something you'd like us to host. We are on the remote eastern edge of Apache Junction, mere steps from the wilderness, so I don't see where a little sign height is really going to make that much difference. We are located far from any home or business, so there really isn't going to be any view obstruction. And the height variance allows us to have the triune cross at the top of the sign. This is not a light matter in the Missouri Synod. This is extremely important. And I feel that that symbol is every bit important to us as a logo is to an RV resort corporation. So I really like your consideration on allowing us this height variance. We aren't asking for a whole lot. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank.
Any questions?
Anyone have any questions for Frank?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I do. Frank? I understand the importance to the church, but is there a significant reason as far, the height of the sign, you've covered that, but is there a significant reason to go with the 0 setback instead of the 5 foot? I mean,
I think that's being granted just because of how far the highway, we are from the highway anyhow.
because it's already at 78 feet.
Yeah, I mean, we're set back further than most signs in town are anywhere, just by, even with a 0 setback.
Okay.
So I don't think we're intruding at all into the public area.
Just curious as to the reason why
Again,
that was being asked for.
We're back that far, another 5 feet forward, another 5 feet back buries us even further. We do have some trees on the facility that we like to keep, and we don't want to ruin the line of sight completely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That it, everyone? Okay. Somebody's phone. I have a question for Rudy, just kind of a curiosity question. In that diagram of the sign, where the V, before the V starts, it's at 12 feet, or it looks in the picture, you know what I'm talking? Where you're saying the 12 feet is, and then the,
Yes, the
I
embellished.
don't know what to call it.
With the triangle
embellishment.
cross.
Yeah, that starts, that's the other, everything that's over the 12 feet. If a sign was flat on the top at 12 feet and had a cross sitting on top, would that be outside of the sign ordinance?
Yes, ma'am.
That counts as the 12 feet, even if the cross is just sitting on top?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay, I'm just curious, okay.
Madam
Yes.
Chair, maybe Rudy and Larry, you can refresh my memory. With Fry's, with their sign package, not on their building, but on the monument sign package, I know they had originally proposed a high, more than the 12 feet. Did we grant them
Yes.
that?
Yes, the main Fry's sign right on the corner of Idaho and Old West Highway, that sign was allowed to be 12 feet 8 inches.
Okay, all right.
All the
And-
rest of them are 12 or
Right.
shorter.
And then I remember that RV park sign, that was kind of a source of contention, I think, thinking it was, because they wanted a substantially larger sign, I believe.
If I recall correctly, the issue with the RV park is our current sign code. One of the omissions in our sign code is that we don't define how tall signs can be for RV parks. Our old code used to allow a 12-foot sign, so the interpretation was, okay, well, that part of the code was omitted for whatever reason, so the next most reasonable standard to apply was, I think, was the
8 feet?
subdivision standard, which was 8 feet. The applicants, because they were close to the highway but not exactly on the highway, and because our code lacked a definition for RV park signs, they requested a 12-footer.
Any other questions before?
Well, I guess just
Yeah.
then, then the rationale for, I mean, is it just simply compliance with the sign code versus
Mm-hmm.
they are far back and then they're not endangering the potential for blocking views or anything from that point, just simply the sign code?
Yes, sir.
Well, the other aspect to this is our code essentially says that the sign has to be at the curb height or at the crown of the road. In this particular case, there's about a 3-foot grade elevation between the road. So staff, I think, was being reasonable, saying, well, we're not going to make you dig down where the sign is 3 feet to grade, and then the whole sign would have been hidden. So another accommodation, I think administratively made, was that the sign could be at natural grade. A lot of sign codes say natural grade. What they don't want folks to do is bring in 30 feet of fill and then set a sign on top of 30 feet of fill. So our current code, and again, it's another one when we get back to working on it, I think it's reasonable to say that a sign can be at natural grade. So it's not in here. In theory, you could add it as a motion, I suppose, but we thought it was reasonable to say, well, we're not going to make you put it at the crown of the westbound lane, and then you'd have to basically dig so much and then set back too. So you wouldn't just dig for the sign, you'd have to remove a lot of fill so that you could have a line of sight. So this thing is sitting at natural grade. So when you see the bottom of the sign, is what they're showing here is natural grade. And most sign codes do say natural grade rather than say curb or the crown of the road. So that's just another thing that I think we need to fix with the code.
Yes, Michael?
If we approve the CUP, are they locked into this sign shape? Or can they come back and say, we want the whole 16 inches and fill up the whole 16-inch space?
They'd be locked into this. So
Into
it's,
this?
this would be it, correct. They can't change it after. This
And
is
then
the,
decide
so you approve
overall.
the CUP subject to these drawings.
Okay, that brings up a thought. I don't know if that's where Michael's going. So the dimensions of the sign, they were well within, I think, our sign, the dimensions of
Square footage, correct.
square footage. Is it might not be to their liking. Could they make the sign wider?
I
And
think
then
these
have
electronic message center signs come in now standard dimensions.
Oh,
So they're off the shelf. type things that
Oh.
Frank could
I
explain
was just
that.
thinking if you made it a little wider and could put the cross on the side versus above. I mean, I realize it might not meet their desire, but if you could make it wider, then you could still have I understand the cross. I think that makes every bit of sense. If it has to be
I
on
want to
top.
say that I think that it can go up to 120 square feet, I believe, so they're below the
Or
total
109
square
or something
footage.
like that.
Yes.
How high is our, it's called marquee sign, which it's not really a marquee sign, but the marquee sign and the focal point, how tall is that? Is that 12 feet?
I believe that's 12 feet, Madam Chair.
And you can see that clearly
Right.
coming from quite a distance, either direction. You know, the video, it's not like it's clear down at the ground level and there's stuff below and above that.
Yes, at that location, the right-of-way width is in relation to the property line is probably less than the right-of-way width. In other words, the edge of the asphalt to the property line is greater at Mountain View than it is to the focal sign in downtown.
All I'm trying to visualize is, which we don't have here, is when we are actually driving, I can picture our marquee sign because I see it all the time, but I can't picture in my mind how this is going to look at the size that it is with that roadway, which you can't, you know, to just visualize what it's going to look like, whether it's tall enough. I mean, we know that there's that situation sometimes of signs because they're far away or different things that they're not big enough to see, you know. That's all I'm. No, you can't. So, anyway,
Okay,
Madam Chair,
yes,
I remember we had a discussion with Ross
yeah.
and their signs. They came in and said they had to
Yeah,
have,
let me, I've never called for a discussion. I think I need to do that, shouldn't I?
Yes,
Or-
and if you want, you can ask the applicant to come back up, but then open it up to a public
Well,
hearing
start
again.
out- Yeah, I
And I
understand.
would recommend that you do that.
Okay,
okay,
so why don't we just do that?
Okay.
And let this gentleman come back up and
Okay.
talk, and then we'll do the rounds all again.
okay.
What you brought up, madam, is a very good point. So the question is, what am I going to see when I drive by with this new idea of this V? And for the majority of the distance that you drive by, it would be as if I put a monitor straight at you, because as you're driving, it's just at an angle that when you look over, so you're going to see just that. When my point is that when that is faced on that angle, as you're driving, the sign, the display is actually towards you. So you're
I
going to
understand.
see that.
You need to talk in,
Okay.
the recording doesn't
Yeah,
pick you
so-
up if you
So
don't.
the question that you brought up was a very good question, is what do we see when you have this new design, this new V? What do we see when we drive by? And the point of having it on a V is that for the majority of the distance and all line of sight considered, when all the matrix is figured out, you end up seeing that display more at you than any other shape.
No, my question, though, actually has nothing to do with the V
Okay,
shape.
okay.
My question has to do, if your sign was only 12 feet
Okay,
max,
yes.
are we going to see that much less of your sign to be able to see it if it was only 12 feet?
Yeah, so when it's, yeah, thank you, I see what you're saying. So when you were saying the V, you were talking about the top of the sign, the triangle, not the shape and the plan view. I understand now. So yes, it's hard to show you what ends up happening when you take a sign and move it 80 feet back. It is so far back from the road that it's hard to see. So it is like, it's like taking a sign in from your front of your property and moving it to the back of your property. Most people, property is 100 feet back. So at 80 feet back, it's a 12-foot-6, a 13-foot-6 sign would look the same as if it is at 20 feet off the road. And the example of Fry's Yeah, they had 12'8". They're 12'8" at 20 feet from the road or 10 feet from the road. They're on top of the road at 12'8". So if you follow that same line of sight, we're far below that. That is given even more latitude at 12'8" at 20 feet than at 13'6" at 80 feet. So that distance is so far back that it would be the same as if you were looking at a 12-foot high sign or less at a distance of only 20 feet back or 15 foot back. It's so far back that it will look smaller than 12 foot. That's how far back it is from the road. In most cases, in all the cities that we work in, it's 15, 20 feet, 10 feet, 5 feet. We're 4 times that distance far back from the road, and that does have a bearing on height. And when you rework on the sign code, I think it would be great to look at that, and so that's matrix is figured in. So I wanted to add that.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
what is the elevation difference from where the sign will sit and the roadway?
What is the elevation distance from?
Difference?
Roadway.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Higher or lower?
Larry brought it up, you're 3 foot. There is a mound of dirt there, and then also from the other side, even with the mound of dirt, and when you go 80 feet, I wish we could have all of us go out to the property. When you're that far back, it's so far back that it's going to appear as if it's less than 12 foot tall. So, but what the point was is that, yes, the traffic going westbound, the berm is not as much. From the eastbound, where you're at, when you look across, you end up seeing the
roadway.
barriers that are in the road. So going from the eastbound direction, when you're going eastbound out to Superstition Springs, you see the barriers in the road. So you're so far down that when you look up, your line of sight is that you see the barriers. So it's a very unique situation there because of the barriers on eastbound. The property goes down on the eastbound lanes, and then there's the medium, and then there's the westbound lanes, so that the grade is changing from eastbound to westbound to the property.
Okay, what's the 12-foot elevation on the map then?
So the 12 foot on the elevation is, like Larry mentioned, it is based off of grade. Most, like all other cities have, it's 12 foot off of grade to the point before the embellishment.
12 foot, okay. Thank you for explaining that to me.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
one of the things that we talked about with the Ross CUP was the fact that there was a distance between the building and the roadway. Listening at part of the discussion tonight, the distance is farther, much farther away than the distance from the roadway for the Ross CUP that we granted. Granted, there's a little bit difference in the signage, okay? But the distance overall would probably compensate for the 16 inches. Food for thought.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So would that be true? Would the distance from a trail to the Ross storefront, would that be less than 80 feet?
The distance from the trail to the front of the Ross store, I believe, is more than 80 feet. It's more like at least a couple of hundred, maybe 300.
Okay, all right.
But this isn't, Ross isn't the monument sign though, right? That's the
Right,
signage on the
that's
building.
right.
Sign on the
Right,
building.
it's a little bit different sign,
So height is
Yeah.
irrelevant in that case.
but
Right,
theory,
and-
Right,
there's
Right.
some theory
One
in
at,
there.
one at a time.
Sorry,
Okay.
Um,
Do we have any more questions for the applicant?
I do, yes.
Okay.
Madam Chair, okay. All right, Mr. Quinn, I guess I'm going to ask you the question. You know, I realize it seems like we're being maybe a little petty with this, 16 inches thing, but, we try to do right. And when it was indicated that, the natural grade is now 3 feet higher than the actual road grade, and that's something we have to consider. Has there been any consideration to redesigning the sign to use the width to your advantage versus the height? That you could incorporate that triune cross elsewhere?
We spent a lot of time with the design on it, and we've made a lot of adjustments in the height to get there. And we have a theory, artistic theory and design business, and we're the company that brings a higher quality, higher definition, and a more careful study. And also, we have in our design process, and the team that works on this is a thing called massing, so that the sign has the right amount of mass. Where if you're really, really wide and not as tall, we call it, the massing isn't correct. It's getting wider and wider and wider, and it just ends up sticking across on the side, and it doesn't end up becoming a piece of artwork. It doesn't end up becoming this beautiful contribution to the city.
But if you couldn't have those 16 inches, would there be value in looking to adjust the width of the sign?
We would have to do something, but I share with you that every place that we work with, one, they have a separate section of the code that allows for crosses. Crosses, there is no issue on height whatsoever. We did the cross for the sign for the Holy Cross Catholic Church, and that the cross itself is not considered any part. The dome part is considered part of the dome itself is considered part of the embellishment. So most all of the places that we work in, there is an allowance for an embellishment, and there's a lot of places that have a special consideration, a special allowance for crosses, and especially when it has a strong identity to the church. So when you add that importance, when you add the massing being correct, so that it's not so wide and not in proportion, when you look at it, all those factors were factored in before we put the design in front of you. So yes, if we had to, we'd make it lower and we make it wider and we put the cross on there, and it ends up ruining the actual overall look of the sign. It ends up taking away. It ends up having. Does it fit within the code? Yeah, it does fit in within this code in this city. It does fit in there, and you end up having something that is not as perfect as it is now. It reminds me of the movie Mozart, where the emperor says to Mozart, "It's a wonderful play. It's wonderful. It's beautiful, but it's just too long. Take out some notes. Just take out some notes. So, I don't know. Figure it out. Take out some notes, and it'll be fine. It's just too long." And he says, "Which notes do you suppose I take out? Because anything you do, anytime you remove it, you just ruin the whole play." Yeah. So I could make it wider, and I could add it on, and I can tack it on the side, and we could do that. I think what we've presented is a perfect piece. And when you even with that 3 foot, and I don't even believe it's 3 foot. I like to argue from this position. We never went out there with a transit level and measured it. It may very well be 2 foot or 1.5 feet. And then when you go to the other side of the road, I share with you, when you go from the east side and you look across, you are lower to where you're running into the guardrails. So your view is even obstructed. So we're lowering it even further. And every city we work in, every sign code works off of grade. We dig it down, move the berm, move it down. Again, we are 80 feet back from the road, asking for 16 inches so that we can put the identity across on there in the most perfect place. That's what we're asking.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this is surely not a direction that I'm suggesting you go, but, I mean, could you not use the T in mountain and replace it with your cross, and therefore your cross is still there and it's underneath or it's at the 12-foot mark?
I think you're suggesting to take the trident cross and move it into part of the lettering?
Have the cross be the T in the letter. Again, I'm just throwing things against the wall just to see if, looking for other options for you. Now, with that being said, again, that was just one of these ideas. But I mean, I know a lot of times lately, it seems like the commission is, you know, the staff is recommending one thing, and we're coming in here and we're gangbustering, we're changing it up. And it just seems like that's just, you know, the way it's been going. But I feel inclined to let them have the 16 inches, and with no disrespect to the city at all, I understand that, you know, it's their job. They're going, this is our code, and this is the way it is. And lately, it seems like we've just been butchering that, but this,
I
to
can
me,
understand the fairness and consistency, and I think it'd be very fair and consistent. So listen, everybody that comes in the city, if you're 10 foot back or you're 20 foot back, you're this height. If you're 80 foot back, we will allow you to have an embellishment area. I think that would be also fair and consistent. And that someone else comes in and says, okay, well, I like to have 13'6" too. Yeah, but you're asking for 13'6" at 5 feet off the property line, and your property line's right on the road. So in fairness, that we could still keep that fairness in play. We can still keep the consistency in play. If you come in front of us and you're 80 foot apart, we'll look at you. That's what this is for, something that's unique. So at 80 foot apart, we'll look at it. But if you are 5 foot or 10 foot back, or a case like Fry's, which is maybe 10 foot back, and they're at 12 foot 8, we're far less in our request in a line of sight matrix, asking for 16 inches at 80 feet back.
Rudy or Larry, I'm sorry.
Okay, I was going to say.
Madam Chair, can I?
I was going to say, is there any more questions?
Mr. Quinn made mention of this. There is latitude or leeway given, or there's special consideration given to crosses. Can you comment on that? Is that true? Is it if you're looking at a cross as part of a sign that there are
I
special
can't speak to it
accommodations?
per se. I'm sure there's ordinances out there that do. There may be cities that say it's a church, we're not even gonna look at it because of federal RLUIPA.
Yeah.
But I think legitimately that, to me, signs can be regulated, even if it's a church. So that's why it's still in our code. But the city could decide when you amend the code, exempt churches from the code. Some cities do that as well, but I do think it's, you can regulate it.
Fear of God kind of thing.
I don't know. But yeah, there could be, there may be codes, and Frank he works in all sorts of cities all over the place, so I don't know exactly what.
Yeah. Okay, I just wasn't
But
sure.
again, I can tell you that there are codes that allow for certain embellishments, or things that even project above the sign a little bit, or that go to natural grade instead of the curb height. So sign codes, there's some general things, but then they're supposed to be community specific. And there also then can be specific based on a zoning code. So you can have sign differences in residential areas versus commercial areas in terms of overall size and things like that. So if there was one sign code everybody would adopt, then we'd take all the fun out of it, I guess.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Commissioner Heck, curiously enough, previous version of our sign code said that religious symbols would not be counted in number or area as signs. A monument sign was still a monument sign, and it was still subject to a certain maximum height and a certain maximum sign. But for example, if you were to put a 20-foot cross on the church building itself, or if you had a freestanding cross or whatever other religious symbol it was, those items in and of themselves were not regulated by the sign code. But anything that was attached to your monument sign was subject to the sign code. So a little variation perhaps on the question you asked, but for whatever reason, our new sign code lost that language about, religious symbols by themselves would not be regulated.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Quinn? Okay, thank you.
Thank
you. Okay, we'll open this back up to the public again. If anyone has any questions, come on down and give your name and address. You might, can pull down.
Chairwoman Nesser, Commissioner, I am Terry Kreidler. I live at 489 North Gold in AJ. My only thing is, I just have a couple comments. Why do we have sign codes? Sign codes are not being followed. Every other day, somebody comes in here getting a new, you know, exemption for their sign code. Talked about Ross. I can see the Ross sign from the new roundabout. That's a long way to see a sign. We have a dark sky ordinance here in AJ. Are we going to just put lighted signs willy-nilly everywhere, however big you want to put them? I mean, it's starting to look ridiculous, and we have ordinances and rules for a reason, and it seems like the commission is not following them or even really caring. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to discuss? Any thoughts, any ideas, anything? Nothing?
Well,
Madam Chair,
Yes.
are we closing the public
Oh,
hearing then?
I'm sorry, yes, duh, thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to speak? Okay, I'll close the public portion and open it up for discussion with the board. Anything? Anyone?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think the reason why people come to the commission is to get permits to change the code. I mean, that's what we're here for, so it's not like this commission is ignoring the codes. We're here because people are coming to change and get permits to be able to change the code. So, I don't think 16 inches is a huge thing, personally. I don't think it's something that is going to go down in history as one of the worst decisions this commission's ever made. I think if they appeal it to the council, they'll probably allow them to do it. That's just my 2 cents.
I have to agree with you that basically all it is the cross. If it was accommodating the screen portion of the sign, you know, that was that much bigger. Willie, you have anything?
Madam Chair, I
Yeah.
think that this is a process they're following, and 16 inches at 80 feet is not going to make a whole lot of difference based on the location of where this is. I'm in favor of granting them the 16 inches.
Michael? Nothing, Peter?
I do have a comment, I guess, question. So, just for further clarification, that part of the sign is not part of the EDM sign, or the electronic, it's EMD. I mean, it won't be lit, correct?
it'll be internally lit.
But it won't be the
It won't be a
electronic
box.
message,
It'll be a little peak.
right?
That is internally lit.
But it'll be backlit. It won't be as bright, I guess, as the electronic message board part.
Right.
Okay, all right.
And there are limits on those too, so they're supposed to have automatic dimmers, and there are sections of the code that deal with ambient light for the
Okay.
screen itself.
And besides, dark sky is limiting to lighting up into the skies. A sign doesn't shine up into the sky. It radiates light, but it doesn't shine up into the sky.
Right.
It's not directed that way,
Correct.
so. Stephen, anything? Anybody? Nothing?
Well,
yeah.
I do. We have proposed new neighbors moving in across this Old West Highway.
Mhm.
And with that coming in, 178 new potential properties or residents, how is that light going to affect them with the elevation going into their, are we going to get light complaints? It may not be dark skies going up in this, but it is projecting across the roadway, and I don't even, trying to remember what how close the neighbors are as far as like on, what is it, Hilton, over in that area. I think from the angle of the V, I don't think it would really affect them too much, but the potential for across the street, I see a potential problem with that, but
The only thing I can think of is driving down the trail and looking at our own marquee sign at night, it doesn't radiate much light.
But it's a lot lighter at
Yeah.
Focal Point than it is out at Goldfield and Old West
Well, I
Highway.
agree, yeah.
And it will stand out significantly out there. Now, granted, with new houses moving in, there will be streetlights and whatnot, so the gradient light will dampen that just a bit, but
Larry, are you operating this right now?
Yes, I am.
Can you kind of move your arrow
Well,
and show us?
this will be Southern.
Right.
Southern will extend at some point. Again, not all
That's
of this
where the
has been
houses-
worked out, but typically, with their concept plan, there would be a back wall. So there will be a half-street improvement on the south side of Southern. Again, all this intersection and how this is going to work is still going to need a traffic study. The sign is going to be, I think it's located right about
Oh,
in
okay,
here.
that's what I was gonna ask you, about where is it
Yeah,
exactly?
I tried to do the street view, but to me, there is a slight grade change, but it was hard to do because who knows how the Google driver, where
Yeah.
they were sitting there, the camera was on top of the car, so you don't get it exactly the perspective of that.
And this wall is gonna be the standard 6 foot?
There will be the half-street improvement, there'll be a landscape strip, and then a 6-foot wall.
and the elevation between the two sides is undetermined?
I
The
couldn't
2
say
feet,
for
5
any
feet?
certainty.
Because I know there is a difference.
Yeah.
Exactly lower.
This is lower than this, yeah,
Madam Chair?
yes.
I thought of that very same thing, Commissioner Kreigler, about the new homes coming in there. Now, at Old West Highway, I mean, that's significantly, that's a pretty good-sized berm right there, going up that hill, reaching that property. It's much higher than on the other side of the road. So with that height and a 6-foot brick wall, may not even see it.
Right.
And I'm assuming also the billboard-style sign where it's on the angle, so it's more visible for oncoming traffic from both directions. It's not a sign that's straight in front. So I wouldn't even think that even if it were visible at some point or another, it wouldn't be something staring right at them, right? They would have an angle of it. But that did cross my mind, and it did raise concern because these people might not want to move into a house along that border there, or along the wall there with the illuminated sign on the other side of the street.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll call for a motion,
All right, Madam Chair,
yes.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve case CUP-6-18, a request by Mountain View Lutheran Church, AJ Inc., represented by Frank Quinn of Brilliant LED Signs LLC, requesting approval of a conditional use permit to allow for a 13-foot, 4-inch tall V-shaped EMD monument sign set at the property line located at 2122 South Goldfield Road, Apache Junction, zoned public institutional by plan development, subject to the following findings and conditions. Regarding the findings, finding A, the adequacy of roadways, off-street parking, public facilities, obviously, this request application certainly is in full compliance. B, negative impacts arising from emission of odor, dust, gas, noise, lighting, vibration. Again, I believe the commission would agree that that is not an issue at this point. The lighting could be called into question, but I don't believe at this point it would be. C, contribution to the deterioration of the neighborhood or the negative impact on neighborhood property values. Again, there are really no, at this particular point in time, there are very few properties around there, I think, that would have any kind of negative impact from the sign. Compatibility, D, compatibility with surrounding uses and structures. And then I believe the commission will agree that the staff, with the staff, that because the buildings are substantially set back from Old West Highway, their request for a 0-foot setback and the V-shaped sign would be appropriate and acceptable. Finding E, conformance with the general plan and city policies. Again, the commission agrees with the staff with the proposed sign deviating from what the code allows. The sign is not straying too far from the code, and the requests are reasonable. F, screening and buffering of uses. Again, this application for the sign would not create an issue for that. G, the unique nature of the property use and/or development's physical characteristics. The commission will, the motion will include a disagreement with the staff that due to the unique characteristics and the fact that the request or the sign will be 80 feet from the roadway, requiring that the sign meet the 12-foot height code requirement is not reasonable, and thus would allow for their 13-foot 4-inch request. And then the conditions. Condition 1, approval is given for one 13-foot 4-inch tall monument sign set at the property line at natural grade to be located at 2122 South Goldfield Road in basic accordance with the drawings submitted with case CUP-6-18. Condition 2, condition 2, 3, 4, and 5, or condition 2, 3, 4 are acceptable as, or motion is to accept as stated, recognizing that in item number 4, Planning and Zoning Commission shall reserve the right to reconsider or overturn the conditional use permit approval at a new public hearing for non-compliance with any condition prescribed herein.
That's your motion?
My motion.
Do you want a discussion?
Yeah, probably should, I guess.
Anyone want to discuss any of the findings of fact or any of the conditions? Nothing? Okay. I'll call for a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please, Rudy.
Chairwoman Nisser.
You know, I sort of agree with, we have a code that we should follow, but I also believe if we didn't, we wouldn't need CUPs, and if we didn't that, then the staff could do this. You wouldn't even need a planning and zoning for a CUP to come to. So the CUP comes to us because they're asking something that's out of the ordinary. I look at this isn't downtown in the city and right with all the other businesses. So as much as I believe we should stick to the 12-foot height and what our code calls for, I am going to vote yes to allow the additional inches.
Commissioner Howard.
Yes.
Commissioner Schroeder.
Yes.
Vice Chair Heck.
Yes.
Commissioner Kreidler.
Yes.
Commissioner Frank.
Yes.
So moved, Madam Chair. The CUP is approved unless any of these CUPs, unless someone within 20 days appeals, subject to have filing fee in writing, the appeal procedure, Madam Chair.
Okay. We'll move on to old business, which there is none. New business, which there is none. Information and reports.
Just that the joint meeting with Park Board is coming up October 9th, which would be, I think, our next meeting. So it is at 6 o'clock, so we'll have, depending on what the regular agenda is, we'll have that joint meeting at 6. That will be a presentation by the consultant, and then our regular meeting would be at 7 or soon thereafter when the presentation's over.
Larry, is this document at the end of,
This
is that related to?
No, that's coming up.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm doing information reports. I'm now going to talk about.
Yes, that's our
So I
director's report.
don't know of any other information reports off the top of my head other than that we're having the joint meeting next time.
Okay. Well, we'll move on to Director's Report, which is a presentation and discussion on the 2020 General Plan project scope and schedule.
Were you going to present that for me, or?
No,
did
I
you-
just,
Oh,
I
okay. I
didn't
just
see it,
checked.
sorry, I didn't see.
All right. Well, I think I already had that loaded. Let me a second here. Let me do that. So I kind of wanted to, it's that time again. So and I also want to talk about this in somewhat of the context of some of the other projects we're working on, but this is a life of its own. So we kind of created an internal staff committee, and I'll kind of go through that. The city traditionally has done a plan every 10 years. Technically, it's not required that you update it. There may or may not be a penalty if you don't. It's hard to say, but the city has a tradition of doing it. I agree with that. The timing is probably not the best of us when we talk about everything else, but part of that is because the 2020 census, you don't really get the data until 2021. We'll be doing this plan with really 2010 data. You do get the American Community Survey. You get data that in theory is annualized, but the real census is done in April of 2020. The data comes out a year later. Ideally, we would be on a schedule like 2022. Be that as it may, I'm just going to kind of walk through this. There is a general requirement. You have a vision statement and mission statement. Those are the statements that the council has done. So this is just some philosophy, like I just went through, is that we should be looking forward as a city. The city has a lot of change on the horizon. I think it's been good. In Arizona, though, the plans are fairly generalized. They are broad brush. They're not comprehensive plans or master plans, so the plan is kind of a general guiding principle. I put in who the stakeholders might be. Some cities around us have just finished. They spent $200,000. Our budget is $0. So I understand Florence is about to go through this, for they're spending about $200,000 on their plan. So we're doing this with existing staff and as a team approach, which I think is the way it was done last time. I kind of outline in here what the required elements are, depending on your city size, that are in the state statute. So you have to have certain elements. If you're greater than 10,000, everybody has to have a land use and a traffic circulation element. And then you may include these other elements. Our current plan does include many of those. So I've merged like 3 different kind of templates here together, but we have met as a staff back in April. We're setting up monthly meetings internally. I've done this before where we've had like a 25-member citizen committee, and many of the area plans have done that, where we essentially have to have this adopted by February of 2020 so it can be on the ballot in August of 2020. So the time frame is fairly compressed. So in essence, we have to go through, and I'll kind of walk through that. So we're talking about what's in bold here are really those required elements. So you could group these into 3 sets of this plan, kind of an overview, then elements, and then kind of an implementation, how the plan could be. Instead of just 15 chapters, we could have, overall a section is on the introduction, kind of our demographics. Then kind of part 2, if you will, of the plan would be the elements. Part 3 would be kind of our implementation. So then this chart is supposed to say whose department is the lead, who could be the backup. So you'll see some of these elements like Park and Rec. They're going to be working with the Park and Rec Board to develop Park and Rec element. Economic development staff, they would be the lead on this. We'll give them some tools and templates. Then part of these, so we have these dates out here which are showing the meetings. One of the things was that because we're doing this active transportation plan, we're having a community meeting on the 14th of November. So the idea is that on November 28th, we would have kind of a kickoff meeting. The idea there is we would take, Frank Schoenbeck mentioned the town hall. The city recently did some survey work with the community. There was a town hall. The council has had the EPA infill workshop. The council has had strategic sessions that they've had with staff. All of that to me kind of points to what are some of the community issues, and we could lay those out there, but hear from the public, what other things are we not hearing that weren't mentioned at the town hall or at the EPA infill workshop, things like that. So that's the idea of a community meeting number one. And then we'd have a second community meeting in June. We'd have some work sessions. Then I kind of put resources here. So again, it's a lot on one sheet, but on the far left are what are the elements. The next column is who is the lead, who might be participating or the backup. When are those monthly meetings? When does it go to the council? So on this, first left column is what are some of our data resources, if you will, of where we get data. So again, I'm including the National Citizen Survey, which the city did, and we're trying to do every couple of years. Some of those ASU reports, all going to blend into this plan. The city's 2012 transportation plan, our ITS is Intelligent Transportation Systems Strategic Plan, what the county is doing, some of their, all that kind of feeds into as background for the plan. And then, again, there would be a community meeting in October. Then we kind of start the formal public hearing process next fall. Some council work sessions. You folks would adopt it or recommend adoption to the council before the end of the year, and the council would have to adopt this, like I said, February, in order to be on the ballot in August. So it's a pretty compressed time frame. I think that's it. So I kind of wanted just to alert you that this is with the help of economic development staff, parks and rec staff. Heather in the housing could do the housing element, so we've kind of divvied up at least 4 or 5 of the elements to some of the other departments because it relates to them. So we've invited, the library director has been part of this, the police chief's part of it, because there are elements relating to, public safety and public services. So again, in bold are kind of the required ones, the other ones that we've kind of done anyway. So I also wanted to show this, if I could, on the overhead, if I know how to do it. If I hit it. There we go. Rudy's better at this than I am. Zoom in. So some other projects that we're working on right now. We have been talking for 3 years about updating our property maintenance code. We're finally close to a draft. The property maintenance code under Volume 1, Chapter 9 is a health and sanitation element. That was adopted in 2006, so that's fairly old. So code enforcement staff, we're going to be working with Joel to get that to Joel fairly quickly here. Again, we're talking about updating. We were talking about the 2015 building codes. We're now talking about just adopting 2018. Mesa is adopting the 2018 code. So our goal, if you could see this whole thing, is we're talking about taking things to the council in November with, if we can. But the goal, in order to get the general plan, I'm bringing it up in this context. So we have, 7 other projects we're working on. The active transportation plan gets adopted in theory January 15th. So projects, and there's just a small presentation, but it kind of fits in. That's going to happen actually next week. But if we could get 1 through 5 done by the 1st of in January, that kind of takes a whole boatload of stuff off of us where we can kind of concentrate on the general plan. Every 5 years you have to update your development fees. So we're in that 5th year now. So now we're looking at letting a contract and putting out a request for proposals. Last time we did a sole source contract. So we want to do an RFP, look at different firms. So on top of the general plan and all these other projects, we have to update the impact fee code. Again, the zoning code and fixing the wireless code we've been talking about for a long time. We brought the sign code forward. Sometimes those things take on a life of their own, if it's possible, and there's a whole bunch of meetings tied with this, but Ideally, what I'm just trying to show you is we could get 1 through 5 done in January, then we can kind of roll up our sleeves and concentrate on the development fees. Then there's a question, how much of the zoning code do we do now, or do we wait till the general plan is done? So it could be the complicated things again are the sign part of it, the group homes. Some of the other stuff would be just tuning it up. So again, it was adopted in 2014. I kind of wanted to get that done out of the way. So that's just the whole context, is that we now have to launch a general plan update within having all these other projects going on, so.
Okay, we'll be busy for the next year. We'll all be busy. Okay, selection of meeting dates, times, location, and purpose?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission hold a special joint meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Parks and Recreation Commission on October 9th, 2018, at 6 p.m. in the City Council chambers located at 300 East Superstition Boulevard, and the Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting on October 9th, 2018, at 7 p.m. in the City Council chambers located at 300 East Superstition Boulevard.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Do we, roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Schroeder,
Yes.
Vice Chair Heck,
Yes.
Commissioner Kreidler,
Yes.
Commissioner Frank,
Yes.
Chairwoman Nestor.
Yes.
So moved, Madam Chair.
And if I hear no objections, I will adjourn this meeting at 8:41 p.m.